What are combos? No, really. It's hard to quantify because there's so many to talk about. We can all agree at least to some extent as to what a combo can look like. Dualcaster Mage and Twin Flame can create infinite creatures, making it a two-card combo that wins the game. Thassa's Oracle and Demonic Consultation don't go infinite, but still win the game nearly guaranteed. So we can agree that both of those are combos, but what about Craterhoof Behemoth with 10 tokens? This is where things get muddy, because it's still a powerful combination of cards and effects that end the game, but doesn't go infinite, even though it can win nearly regardless of all other contexts like the previous. But what interests me the most is when you have cards that work together to do a really powerful thing, but doesn't inherently close out the game. Is it still a combo then? We're in an interesting time in Commander where the strong things that most players want to do win the game, but don't actually end it on their own. And with the new bracket system directly referencing combos, this has led me to the feeling of need for a reapproach of such definitions. Combos inherently are short for combinations, basically meaning a combination of cards that do a powerful thing. But I feel that the powerful things that decide games' fates don't always need to be the ones that close the game. For instance, let's say I have Notion Thief and Jace's Archivist. They work really well together, allowing me to wheel everyone, but instead of my opponent's drawing, I get to take them instead. Does it truly matter how the game gets closed out by that point? If my opponents get beamed down by a 2/2 bird token, would that invalidate the strength of the supposed combo? Commander has gotten out of control recently, with nearly every deck and strategy being a variant of snowbally midrange. There's very little true variety in strategy as opposed to other formats, where there's a wide range of matchups. You may have to worry if your deck can compete with the fast pace of an aggro deck, inevitability of a control deck, or exploited opportunities of a combo deck. In Commander, there's kind of none of that. Sure, we see some minor variants here and there, and I'll say that as of late, Wizards has done a good job with trying to give us some variety to mix things up. But the majority of decks and archetypes right now have fallen into some variant of snowbally midrange. Why do I bring this up? Unfortunately, it's because many decks can seem to fall into the same patterns, where their most optimal play pattern is to ramp really hard early on, draw way more cards than your opponents, and then from there nothing else matters. It doesn't matter if you close out with an infinite combo, full board lockdown, or even just play big dudes to swing in. None of it matters because it's not the result that won them the game, rather the influential play that allowed them enough tempo to pop off. For those unaware, tempo is essentially just the pacing of a game. There tends to be a dynamic of proactivity and reactivity between the players, where someone does something strong and someone else needs to respond to it. Tempo is interesting because it tends to dictate who's on the offensive and being proactive, and then who's being defensive and is forced to react. Ideally, everyone wants to be the one with the tempo lead, since that can allow you to be the one making big splashy plays. But usually tempo tends to shift after the dominating player runs out of gas and stops having influential plays to make. Once someone has a tempo lead and enough gas to close it out is generally when the game ends. This all is important because there can be two-card combos that give that massive tempo advantage, but don't get the recognition or accreditation for being the driving factor in players' victory. I recently saw a game where someone ramped extremely hard in the early game, cast an overflowing insight on turn 4, ramped a little bit more, then comboed off on turn 6. I thought to myself after the game that I really don't think it would have mattered if they used a combo there to close out the game, since they had such a massive advantage with ramp and draw that realistically anything could have won there. The combo just gets the recognition since it was the chosen weapon. This leaves me in an interesting situation where I want to make a proposition of some kind denouncing the idea of combo's current definition, but I'm having a really hard time coming up with a replacement definition, and this leads me to wondering if we really need one at all. Of course, let me know what you guys would define it as in the comments, as I have a hard time articulating an exact definition that encapsulates the massive tempo shifts as well as the infinites and lockdowns. It's kind of difficult. But this got me thinking about why we have the definitions in the first place. We mostly use it for Rule Zero conversations, as some players don't like playing against combos, so we label and define them so we have an easier time identifying what our deck can do and how it should be handled for those not experienced with playing against it. On this same token, though, I've witnessed an unintended exploitation of this, as the definition doesn't fully cover all the situation in which these combos don't close out the game. Seeing people running cards that work together to be as oppressive as a hardlock without the proper identifying labels, it just gets chalked up to its synergy or they're just good cards. And while these things may be true, I feel it's worthwhile to remember that it doesn't necessarily matter if something is synergistic or not. It's the effect and desired outcome we're looking to achieve. When Wizards printed Nadu, it synergized with untappers and equipment and was a good card, but it still broke the game and called for a banning since it was bleeding too heavily into casual pods. It couldn't be labeled as a combo since it didn't end the game, but gave so much tempo that it distorted the format entirely and made for unfair and unfun casual games. On the same note, if Wizards printed a slew of cards that all said, if you control two of these creature types, you win the game. Of course, they would still synergize, and they would be good cards, but does that make it any different? If we all wanted to run the strongest cards and synergies of the format, we'd play CEDH. And I personally have nothing wrong with CEDH, it's a ton of fun. But for the sake of casual and high power games, I feel it may be time for a reassessment of the definitions we use in our Rule Zero conversations to determine if decks are of mismatched power levels or properly calibrated for a curated, healthy experience. Of course, I'm glad we have the Game Changers list, as wacky as the name may be, but this is an interesting observation I wanted to bring to the community and explore further. My thoughts aren't fully fleshed out on what we should do about this, nor do I think that I alone should come up with a solution, but rather, since this is a community-based game, we as a community should work together to figure out a solution for making sure that we truly encapsulate the nuance of our deck's capabilities and represent that fully. Definitions are always hard and seem to be the biggest cause for miscommunications amongst individuals, so I fault no one for this. I'm just looking to fix a potential problem so we can all communicate with a bit less friction. As always, if you like this video and think someone you know may benefit from watching it, consider sharing it with them so we can all become better deck builders together. This has been Tall Goes Rock, and I am out.